Ladies and gentlemen, let's game into the video. Let us discuss the PlayStation 4's sales figures and success from the perspective of Sony's Shuhei Yoshida. Now, this is part of a much larger interview with Eurogamer, but I want to focus on a couple of very key points that I feel that a lot of us have been discussing amongst ourselves for some time now, and Shuhei is now actually, well, bringing them to the attention of the world. And that would be the success of a dedicated games console. So just to catch everyone up here, the PS4 has sold 10 million units, that's sell-through. And he actually says, Shuhei, that the 10 million sell-through in the first 10 months is well beyond what we had hoped for. As you know, we had actually struggled to keep up with the demand of the PS4, and now we're just starting to catch up. It's beyond our imagination, we're so happy, but we're a bit nervous because we don't really understand what's happening. And you need to understand why your products are selling well so you can plan for the future. And in fact, he says, a little bit later on, that he's actually asking journalists, why do you guys think that the PlayStation 4 is selling well? As well as marketing people, they're basically conducted surveys and trying to actually figure out what the reasons are. Because according to their very early data, in terms of numbers, a lot of the people who own a PS4 didn't own a PS3. In fact, a step further than that, many who actually own a PS4 haven't actually purchased a PS3, an Xbox 360, or even a Wii. So there's a logical question, why are they buying the PS4? And you might think that that's reason for Sony to celebrate. However, there are some concerns they've got going in. As soon as you start seeing a great sales number, he says, our instincts tell us we should be concerned about future sales. Are we exhausting all of the core gamers? If we sell this number of units, there are no more customers who we can sell to. That's a really terrifying prospect. So we want to understand who are those consumers. Do not necessarily consider core gamers. Who are purchasing the PS4 and why are they doing it, and what are they doing with the PS4 so they can create a bit of a positive future rather than saying, wow, we've sold to every single core gamer, so that's what we're doing. At the same time, there are many things we're working on to add new features to the firmware and our network services and games catalog so we can hope and continue the momentum and reach a wider audience than we were able to do with the PS3. In fact, another comment that Shuhei made, he actually apparently got much concern from within Sony. There was actually a lot of internal murmuring to say, well, a dedicated games console, are you sure that's the route that you guys want to go? So it's obvious that possibly at some point Sony were considering a more Xbox 360 approach. Now, it's without question that Sony have had some criticism regarding the speed that they're actually introducing features to the PS4. There have been many promised features that just simply haven't made their way in yet. Indeed, he even comments that the sell-through of The Last of Us is actually doing very well, despite the fact that it's been released, and despite the fact that quite a few people have criticized The Last of Us Remastered. Shuhei believes that it's actually, well, he doesn't believe it, he's got the hard figures to back it up. It's actually selling extremely well. And the reason behind that is because so many people didn't own a PS3. And I imagine quite a few people are rebuying the game anyway, because, well, you might have sold your PS3, you might want to just enjoy it with the high resolution, maybe you didn't buy the downloadable content, and it is slightly cheaper than a normal RRP release of a PS4 title. So I believe we should discuss and probably come to some conclusions as to why the PS4 is selling well. I think, personally, that this isn't a simple answer, but I believe that there are probably many reasons. I think that there was a lot of hype for the next generation of consoles. I truly believe that. Despite the fact that there have been some disappointments and scares almost over the next generation of consoles, like the whole Xbox One DRM issues, there was a lot of scaremongering about that, and the fact that maybe, you are being watched, and then of course there were scares over the PS4's reliability when we saw a couple of crashes, both prior to release and even after release. For the most part, both systems have done extremely well. However, I do think that Sony had a little more momentum than Microsoft, simply because of blunders from Microsoft's PR team. Now, while I do feel that Larry and Phil have done a really immaculate job, for the most part, of pulling Xbox One back into the race. Let's just say that a couple of individuals from previous management made a couple of really big screw-ups. Don Metric alone probably cost Microsoft quite a few sales. The other issue, and I'm sure many of you can kind of gather this one, but it's just the performance difference between the two machines. Particularly, and that's even more critical right now, because there aren't really that many exclusives on either system. I've actually spoken to a couple of people in real life as well as over the internet, and they've just said, well, I bought a PS4 because it looks slightly better, or it was cheaper. Those two things have been kind of crucial. Microsoft's sales figures have actually, of course, picked up since they've released the Connectless SKU. So I think that has somewhat helped. The mixed messages as well from their first E3 conference with TV probably did Microsoft a little bit of harm as well, but I definitely feel the power gap is one. One of the issues is it's extremely difficult to sell something that people deem to be less powerful but for more cash. But while that does explain things why the Xbox One hasn't sold as well as the PS4, why are we seeing so many people now buying a console that just didn't own a PS3 or say a Wii or an Xbox 360? Well, I actually think that there's not a single answer for that. I actually feel that there's multiple answers based on the individual. For one, graphics are definitely becoming better, and gaming as a medium is becoming more mainstream. That's pretty crucial, because as games look better, they play better, and as people accept them more people are willing to play them. If you look at older games and people's reaction to them, particularly the graphics, while an old Mario, and you're probably going to immediately start raging at this, but while an old Mario Bros. 3, is really awesome to play, if you just look at it, you can easily just palm it off as, oh, that's for kids, because it just doesn't look that cool, as harsh as that is to say. And that's the same for the old Sonics, the old Street Fighters. They had an artsy style and the gameplay was absolutely impeccable, but they didn't draw in the viewers. Now, if you look at games such as like Tomb Raider, if you look at games like The Order 1886, The Last of Us, Crisis, and all these other games, they just look amazing. The game engines look, well, impressive. You can actually see, getting to the point now where we can actually see individual beads of sweat forming on someone's face, which is definitely going to pull in people's attention. Plus as well, games are coming, for the most part, more accessible. And the multiplayer and online environments are also leading to people wanting to play them more. Games are becoming more social orientated, which some people might not like. For example, I personally grit my teeth on occasion when I feel that the storyline for games is almost put to second fiddle over the multiplayer aspects. But for the most part, it's a good thing that multiplayer is being introduced. Another point, there are a lot more people now that are growing up and wanting to play games. It's getting to the point where, of course, you're seeing a generation of gamers who now have their own children. And what are they going to do? They're going to buy the games, or buy the game systems for their kids. Also, personally speaking, if you're a PC gamer, as much as I prefer PC gaming, despite the fact that sometimes it does get me in a bit of trouble with you guys, but as much as I do prefer PC gaming, I would advocate still owning a console. Because not only are there console exclusives, sometimes you just want the console experience. And so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of PC gamers were also picking up the PS4 because they look at it and they say to themselves, hey, you know what, this is relatively graphically impressive, so it's not like a massive downshift if I go from a high-spec PC. There are good games that are coming out for it, like, say, The Order 1886. Heck yeah, it's a fairly cheap system, I might as well go ahead and pick it up. However, despite the fact that we've just spent the last few minutes doing analysis on this, there are probably almost, I suppose you could say, secret source reasons for this as well. Sony definitely have an advantage maybe in the core gamer, but Microsoft are not just going to be just saying, oh, okay, well, I'm sure you're fine, you just go ahead. I think that there are a lot more core games around now than what there used to be, and that's obviously working in Sony's favour. But I don't feel that they are just selling to the core audience, but at the same time they can't just rest on their laurels and assume that everything is fine and dandy. The Xbox One, to be honest, at launch, I found it very difficult to recommend as a system. I didn't think the system was bad, I just didn't really feel that it was worth buying, because the PS4 was more powerful, it was cheaper, and both systems, in terms of lineup, to be honest, you know, there were a couple of good games on the PS4. There was like Killzone. Would I have bought a system for it? Definitely not. You know, Resogun was pretty awesome, I'm not going to lie. I would highly recommend trying it, especially if you've got PlayStation Plus. Might as well, it's free after all. But once again, not a system seller. If you've got a PS3 or you're an Xbox 360 owner, there wasn't a whole lot of reason to go for the PS4 or the Xbox One aside from an investment in the future. And certainly less of a reason to go for both. Now things are changing. Now, if you look at the Xbox One's lineup, you can't help but feel that it's actually pretty impressive. Despite the complaints and the whining over certain exclusives recently, hello Tomb Raider, the fact of the matter is the machine is definitely starting to pick up. You can't say to yourself, well, there's no reason to own the system anymore. Anyway, guys, I think I've waxed lyrically enough on this one. I'm curious what you think. Why do you think the PS4 is selling so well? I'm actually genuinely asking. Is it just a simple case of, well, people have to choose a next generation console, so they're just jumping on the one that they perceive to be more powerful? Is it because Sony have won the hearts and minds of gamers? Or is it an X factor? My final thoughts on this one is I feel that Microsoft are definitely going to start catching up when the exclusives come out, when we start seeing the machines really push and pump out the titles which are going to be system sellers. Right now, honestly, I would still recommend buying a next generation system, but which one is kind of a toss-up in terms of the exclusives. Neither system is exactly what I consider to be system seller worthy. In fact, you're just simply buying on the promise of the future. And both systems have a very bright future in my personal opinion. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.